I want you to imagine something, just for a second. Think back to a time when you received exactly what you were hoping for.
Like getting a piece of news you've been waiting weeks to hear.
Yeah, exactly. The facts are all laid out perfectly in front of you, and everything logically points to a victory.
Right.
But inside, you just feel completely hollow.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a very real feeling.
It's like getting a pardon letter while you're still locked inside a dark jail cell, you know?
Right, because the piece of paper says you're free, the facts are legally binding.
But until you actually walk out and feel the sun on your face, your reality is still just cold iron bars. I mean, the math adds up, but the joy just isn't there.
It is, it's a profoundly isolating cognitive dissonance. When the reality of the situation should dictate celebration, or at least relief, your internal landscape is often still entirely caught up in the storm.
Yeah, exactly.
The intellect has moved on to the new data, but your nervous system, your heart, the emotion, it's lagging miles behind. It's still operating in survival mode.
And that bizarre, really painful gap between having the facts and actually experiencing the joy, well, that is the exact mission of today's deep dive.
It's such a crucial topic.
We are exploring a really specific entry from Pastor Rob Bailey's devotional Living Hope. We're looking at day 5, which is titled Firelight on the Road.
Yes.
And to understand this gap, we are going to use one of the most fascinating ancient accounts out there. It's the story of the road to Emmaus found in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 24.
The source material uses this story to masterfully illustrate a core theme of its first week of reflections, which is this sequence: fear meets facts, then faith.
Fear meets facts, then faith. I like that.
Right. What the text makes clear is that the risen Jesus is alive and present, long before the people involved are emotionally ready to process that reality.
Because their worldview has just been violently shattered.
Exactly. And new facts don't instantly put those pieces back together.
So we have to set the stage here to really grasp the weight of this, because the imagery in the text is incredibly vivid.
It really is.
You have 2 disciples. They are leaving Jerusalem, just walking away from the city, and the text describes them as having slow feet and heavy hearts.
Yeah.
And here is the kicker, the part that usually gets totally overlooked. They already have the facts.
Wait, they do.
Yeah. They know the tomb where Jesus was buried is empty. They've heard the reports. That's all chronicled over in John chapter 20, actually.
Right. Okay.
The facts of the empty tomb have been delivered to them, but they are still absolutely crushed.
The source points out that they have reports, but not yet joy. They have facts, but not yet understanding.
It perfectly captures that pardon in a jail cell feeling you were talking about.
Exactly. We have to remember what these disciples actually lost. You know, they didn't just lose a friend. They lost a geopolitical hope.
Right, they thought he was going to overthrow Rome.
Yes. Exactly. So an empty tomb, on its own, didn't cure their sadness. It just added confusion to their grief.
I mean, a missing body doesn't mean a resurrection to them.
No, it just means another indignity.
Right. But then their grief is about to be interrupted. They are walking, they are grieving, and a stranger joins them on the road.
And the stranger is the risen Jesus.
But they are kept from recognizing him. He just walks right beside their sorrow. And okay, let's unpack this.
Okay.
Because I have to push back on the narrative here. This part has always completely baffled me. Why the disguise?
It's a great question.
It almost feels manipulative, right? Like, it's like reading the instruction manual for a complex machine, but still having no idea how to turn it on. They have the reports, but no understanding.
Right.
If my best friend is grieving, I don't put on a fake mustache, walk up to them, and act like a stranger asking why they're crying.
No, of course not.
I wouldn't drag out their pain. I'd just say, hey guys, I'm here. Everything is okay. Look at me. Why wouldn't he just alleviate their suffering the absolute second he had the chance?
Well, what's fascinating here is the specific pastoral approach Jesus takes according to the text.
Okay, tell me more.
We live in a culture that struggles deeply with discomfort. We are surrounded by what psychologists often call toxic positivity.
Oh, for sure. Just good vibes only.
Right, exactly. When someone we care about is hurting, our immediate reflex is to rush in and fix the pain. And honestly, it's not necessarily for their sake, but because their grief makes us uncomfortable.
Wow, yeah. We want to bypass the messy part.
Right. But the pastoral genius here is that Jesus recognizes that bypass trauma is never actually healed. Notice how he deals with their confusion.
He doesn't rush them.
He doesn't shame these disciples into speed. The source explicitly notes that Jesus joins them on the road and asks questions that deliberately draw their pain out into the open.
He makes them articulate the very thing that is crushing them. He wants them to say the words out loud.
Yes. If he simply appeared in blazing glory and shouted, "Surprise, I'm back!" the shock might override their grief momentarily, but it wouldn't process it.
It would just suppress the trauma they endured over the last 3 days.
Exactly. The text provides a vital insight here. The disciples on the road are not hostile to hope. They are simply buried under disappointment.
That's a huge distinction.
It is. Jesus models the profound difference between offering a quick solution and offering presence. He allows them the dignity to process that profound disappointment without judgment.
He walks at their pace.
He lets them speak their shattered expectations, their feelings of absolute failure out loud to him.
And by doing that, he validates the reality of their pain. He doesn't dismiss the fact that Friday was horrific just because Sunday is here.
Right.
It's like he knows that if he teleports them past the wound, it stays infected. He has to walk them through it.
We so often want to rush ourselves or others to the finish line of healing. We hand out empty platitudes like, everything happens for a reason.
I hate that one.
Right. But the narrative shows a savior who is perfectly willing to walk the slow, dusty road of unprocessed grief. He doesn't demand they feel joy before they are ready.
Okay, so he's got them talking. The wound is open. They've laid out all their shattered expectations to this stranger.
Yeah.
But venting doesn't cure grief. At some point, empathy has to transition into intervention. Otherwise, they're just going to cry all the way to their destination.
That's very true.
So what is the trigger that actually shifts their perspective? Because Jesus doesn't just act as a sounding board indefinitely.
No, he doesn't. Once the pain is articulated and the psychological space is cleared, Jesus begins to reshape their entire understanding of reality.
How does he do that?
He does this by opening the scriptures. The text mentions, he goes through Moses and the prophets, the ancient text they would have known inside and out.
Okay.
And he shows them that suffering and glory actually belong together in the Messiah. He uses their ancient texts to contextualize their current trauma.
I want to dig into the mechanism of that argument, though. How do suffering and glory belong together? Because to a first-century Jew, a crucified Messiah is an oxymoron. It's a complete contradiction.
It is the ultimate paradox. The disciples viewed the cross as the catastrophic failure of their movement, like a glitch in the system.
Yeah, exactly.
But by using Moses and the prophets, Jesus reframed the cross not as an interruption of God's plan, but as the central mechanism of it.
Oh, wow.
He takes them back to the Exodus, to the Passover lamb, whose blood brought rescue. He takes them to the prophet Isaiah, who wrote centuries earlier about a suffering servant who would be pierced for the transgressions of the people.
So he's connecting all the dots for them.
Yes, he is showing them that the suffering was the exact prerequisite for the glory. It's like a seed. A seed has to be buried in the dark, and it has to violently break open before it can grow into something that bears fruit.
Right. The destruction of the seed isn't the end of its life. It's the beginning of its purpose.
Exactly.
So when he gives them the historical and theological blueprint to understand that what they thought was a tragic detour was actually the main road all along.
The source has a quote here that anchors this entire concept. It says, "Resurrection is not random surprise. It is the fulfillment of God's story."
A fulfillment, not a surprise. I love that.
Right. Because an empty tomb, by itself, just leaves a vacant hole. It's a mystery, a missing body.
Yeah.
As the devotional points out, John 20 gave the empty tomb, but Luke 24 adds the living voice of Christ, interpreting everything through himself.
Yeah.
The facts needed a framework.
Without the framework of the scriptures to explain why he had to die, the resurrection would just be a bizarre magic trick.
Precisely.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Look at the sequence of events the text highlights, because it maps onto human psychology so perfectly.
Oh, definitely.
The disciples later recount this moment, and they say, "Did not our hearts burn within us while he talked to us on the road, while he opened to us the scriptures?"
That burning heart.
Right. Their hearts start burning. They start feeling this profound internal shift while he is explaining the text to them before their eyes are fully clear to his identity.
Yes, the feeling precedes the recognition.
Think about that for a second. Have you ever experienced that in your own life? Where you are in the middle of a massive life crisis, trying to figure out which way is up, and suddenly someone reframes the situation for you.
And you just feel it click.
Exactly. You feel this profound, warming sense of truth about it just before you fully understand the logical solution. Your intuition catches fire with the truth before your brain has all the data points connected.
Yes.
The text describes this exact phenomenon as living hope at work.
That resonance you're talking about is exactly why the sequence of events is so crucial. The warmth precedes the full intellectual clarity. They are experiencing the resonance of truth.
Yeah, it's visceral.
It is the feeling of cognitive dissonance finally resolving.
Yeah.
All those scattered, confusing, painful data points are suddenly being organized into a beautiful, coherent architecture.
They're starting to see how their specific, agonizing disappointment actually fits into a much larger, triumphant story.
The suffering isn't ignored, it's repurposed.
But, a burning heart is still just an internal feeling. It's not full recognition.
Right, they still don't know it's him.
They are walking, their hearts are on fire, the sun is going down, and they finally reach their destination. And they invite this stranger to stay with them,
Yeah?
to bridge that final gap between feeling the truth and seeing the person. They had to stop walking and actually sit down. This brings us to the transition from the road to the table.
This is where the intellectual explanation of the scriptures gives way to profound personal revelation. They sit down to eat.
The journey culminates at a table.
It does. And it is in the ordinary, everyday act of breaking bread that the disciples' eyes are finally opened. The stranger is recognized. It is the Lord.
It wasn't during the 3-hour theological masterclass on the road that their eyes were opened.
No.
It was when he handed them a piece of bread. Why that specific trigger? Is it just a callback to the Last Supper? Or is there something deeper happening with the mechanism of that realization?
Well, it certainly echoes the Last Supper, but if we connect this to the bigger picture, it speaks to something much deeper about the theology of the Incarnation.
Which is the idea of the divine entering the physical world.
Exactly. Intellectual theology is necessary. It provided the framework we just discussed. But human beings are physical creatures. We need tangible connection.
Right.
The profound truth of God's presence isn't meant to remain an abstract concept debated on a dusty road. It is meant to be experienced in the grit and grain of ordinary life. Breaking bread is the most universal, basic human action of sustenance and fellowship.
So it takes the profound theological truth that suffering leads to glory and brings it right down to a wooden table with crumbs and dirt.
Beautifully said. The text emphasizes that the risen Christ does not simply leave a vacant tomb behind for people to puzzle over. He actively comes near.
He makes the intellectual physical.
Yes, the transition that the source outlined for week 1 from fear to facts to faith is finally completed here.
Fear meets facts, then faith.
Exactly. It requires the living, tangible presence of Christ encountered in the ordinary moments of life to turn that initial confusion into a localized personal hope.
So, what does this all mean for you listening right now? I mean, it's a compelling historical narrative, but the source material is very intentional about making this practical for the modern reader.
It definitely has a very practical takeaway.
The devotional actually suggests a direct application, a next step for you today. When you are dealing with your own disappointed places, your own heavy hearts and slow feet, the advice is to read a story like this slowly.
Yeah, don't rush it.
Don't rush it. Sit with it and wait for that heartwarming clarity.
It requires an immense amount of patience, which is honestly almost always the last thing we feel we have when we are hurting.
Oh, absolutely. When we are in pain, we just want the fast forward button.
We do. But the application is rooted in the reality of the story. The disciples had to walk the long, confusing road, articulating their grief and rebuilding their framework before they got to the clarity of the table.
The text offers a very specific prayer for this process, too. It suggests asking for clarity in the places where grief has narrowed vision.
Narrowed vision. That is such a powerful phrase.
I love that phrasing. Because grief really does narrow our vision. It's a biological and psychological reality, right?
Completely.
When we experience trauma or profound loss, our brains enter a state of hypervigilance. We get tunnel vision. All we can see is the immediate threat, the loss, the failure, the empty tomb. We have the facts of our pain, and they completely block out the horizon.
It is the defining characteristic of grief to isolate us in the immediate moment of loss. It tricks us into believing that the current chapter is the end of the book.
Wow, yeah.
The prayer to expand that narrowed vision is an invitation for the living voice to interpret the pain, to push back the boundaries of that tunnel vision.
To see the bigger picture.
It is an acknowledgement that our current perspective, no matter how factually accurate it feels in the moment, might be incomplete. The facts of the crucifixion were completely real. The nails were real. The death was real.
But they were not the end of the story.
No. The disciples needed their vision broadened to see that the worst thing that had ever happened to them was actually the precursor to the best thing that could ever happen for the world.
They needed to see that their shattered expectations weren't the result of God abandoning them. They were the result of their own framework being too small for what God was actually doing.
Exactly. And the text reassures the reader that the risen Lord walks beside us in every one of those disappointed places, just as he did on the road to Emmaus.
Yeah.
He is not afraid of our narrowed vision. He is not put off by our confusion or our grief or our inability to immediately feel joy when the facts suggest we should.
All right, let's pull all of these threads together and wrap our arms around this whole journey.
That was good.
We started with two people dragging their feet away from Jerusalem, hearts heavier than lead, their entire worldview collapsed. They had all facts, they knew the tomb was empty, but they were still just drowning in disappointment.
Right.
Then a stranger patiently walks with them. He deliberately refuses to bypass their trauma with the toxic positivity.
He draws it out.
He asks the right questions, he draws out the pain, and then he masterfully reframes their entire shattered reality using ancient context.
By showing them that suffering is the seedbed for glory.
Exactly, making their hearts literally burn with resonance. And finally, the whole thing reaches its peak not in a lightning storm or a grand supernatural display, but in the most mundane human moment imaginable.
Breaking bread at a dinner table.
Yeah. Their eyes open, the facts finally meet faith, and that hollow jail cell feeling is entirely filled by his presence.
It had a breathtaking psychological and spiritual trajectory, moving from deep isolation to intimate communion, deliberately moving from fear to facts, and ultimately to a resilient faith.
It truly is, and it leaves me with a thought that I want to pass on to you as we finish up.
Oh, please do.
We talked at the very beginning about that hollow feeling, about staring at the facts of a situation like a clean x-ray or a finalized report and still feeling totally empty. We've seen how the ultimate revelation of hope for these disciples didn't require an escape from their ordinary lives. It happened right in the middle of it.
In the everyday routine.
If the profound realization of their shattered hopes making sense happened in the incredibly ordinary, everyday act of sharing a meal, well, it begs a really important question for you.
What's that?
What profound truths, what answers or disguised hopes are currently walking right beside you in the most mundane, unrecognized routines of your daily life? Could it be that your own shattered expectations, that hollow feeling you can't quite shake, is on the absolute verge of making complete sense at your very next ordinary dinner table? Think about that the next time you sit down to break bread.